The rescue drone almost missed him. IT had been scanning the wreckage of the colony ship Horizon's Dream for 3 hours, finding nothing but frozen bodies and twisted metal. The ship had been torn apart by a reactor failure, leaving debris scattered across 2 million kilometers of empty space. No one was supposed to survive something like that, but tucked inside a small emergency pod, wrapped in a thermal blanket and clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, was a 9-year-old human boy named Danny Wells. The Dragon salvage crew did not know what to do with him. When they pulled the pod into their warship, the soldiers kept their distance. They had heard stories about Earth, the planet humans came from. A Class 12 death world. A place where the gravity crushed bones, the weather killed without warning, and the creatures hunted each other for sport. Humans were supposed to be dangerous, violent, unpredictable, but this one was just a child. A small, shivering child with dirt on his face and tears in his eyes. The commander of the salvage ship made a difficult decision. He could not simply kill a child, even a human one. So he contacted the Dragon Court on Paranthus and asked for instructions. The response came from Sovereign Ashkara herself. Bring the human to me. 3 days later, Danny stood in the grand hall of the Dragon Palace. The room was enormous. Pillars of black crystal rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Rivers of molten rock flowed through channels carved into the floor, filling the air with heat that made Danny's skin feel tight and dry. And everywhere he looked, there were dragons. They watched him from elevated perches carved into the walls. Some were small, barely larger than horses. Others were massive, their wings folded against bodies that could crush buildings. Their scales came in every color: red, gold, black, silver, deep purple. Their eyes glowed like burning coals. Danny had never felt so small in his entire life. At the far end of the hall, raised on a platform of polished obsidian, sat the Sovereign. Ashkara was ancient. Her scales were the color of dark iron, scarred from countless battles. Her eyes held the weight of 10,000 years. When she spoke, her voice echoed through the chamber like rolling thunder. Why had you brought a death worlder into my court? A reptilian creature stepped forward. He was not a dragon. His body was smaller, covered in smooth green scales, and he walked upright on 2 legs. This was Ambassador Fennec of the Scale Coalition, and he bowed low before speaking. Great Sovereign, the human expansion continues across the galaxy. They grow stronger each year. I believe that showing mercy to one of their orphan young might create goodwill between your dominion and their species. A massive dragon with battle-scarred wings descended from his perch. This was High Warden Draken, commander of the Dragon military forces. He landed heavily beside the ambassador, his tail sweeping across the stone floor. Mercy, Draken growled. You want us to show mercy to a death worlder? Have you studied human history, Ambassador? They have fought more wars than any species in recorded galactic history. They kill each other for resources, for territory, for beliefs. They are born in violence and they die in violence. Danny listened to all of this without understanding most of it. He did not know what a death world was. He did not know why these giant creatures were afraid of him. He only knew that his parents were dead, his ship was gone, and he was alone in a room full of monsters. But even through his fear, Danny noticed something strange. In the shadows near one of the smaller pillars, a young dragon sat alone. She was much smaller than the others, and her scales were dull, almost gray. While Danny watched, she coughed quietly, her whole body shaking with the effort. None of the other dragons seemed to notice her. Or maybe they just did not care. The human will remain at court for 1 lunar cycle, Sovereign Ashkara declared. Her voice silenced all other conversation. If he proves dangerous, he will be executed. If not, we will determine his fate at that time. Draken opened his mouth to protest, but the Sovereign's gaze stopped him cold. He will need a guardian, Ashkara continued. Someone to watch him and report on his behavior. Her ancient eyes scanned the room, passing over dozens of powerful dragons before settling on the small, sickly one in the shadows. Ryla, you will serve as the human's keeper. A ripple of cruel amusement passed through the court. Danny did not understand why, but he saw the young dragon flinch as if she had been struck. Ryla rose slowly and walked toward Danny. Up close, he could see that her scales were flaking at the edges. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. She looked down at him with tired golden eyes. "Come with me, human," she said quietly. Danny picked up his stuffed rabbit and followed her out of the great hall. Behind them, he could hear the dragons laughing, but he did not look back as they walked through the volcanic corridors of the palace. Danny moved closer to Ryla. She glanced down at him with surprise. "Why are you walking so close to me?" she asked. Danny shrugged. "You look sad. I thought maybe you could use a friend." Ryla stopped walking. For a long moment, she simply stared at the small human child who had just offered friendship to a dragon. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She did not know how to respond. So she just kept walking, and Danny followed, and somewhere in the distance, the dragons continued to laugh at both of them. Neither of them knew that this was the beginning of something that would change the entire Dominion forever. Ryla had been sick since the day she hatched. The other dragons did not talk about it openly, but everyone at court knew. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and many believed the illness had passed between them. Her scales never developed their proper shine. Her fire never burned as hot as it should. And her lungs were the worst part. Some days she could barely breathe without pain. In dragon society, weakness was not tolerated. The strong ruled, the weak served, and those who were too weak to serve were simply forgotten. Ryla had been forgotten for most of her 100 years of life. That was why the sovereign had chosen her to watch the human. It was an insult to both of them. If the Death Worlder child turned violent and killed her, no one would mourn. If she failed in her duty, no one would be surprised. She was expendable, and everyone knew it. She led Danny through the winding corridors of the Dragon Palace. The walls were carved from black volcanic rock, still warm to the touch. Streams of lava flowed through channels in the floor, providing light and heat. For a dragon, it was comfortable. For a human from a temperate world, it was nearly unbearable. But Danny did not complain. He just wiped the sweat from his forehead and kept walking. His room was a small chamber near the servant quarters. It had a stone bed, a small table, and a window that looked out over a field of steaming volcanic vents. Not exactly welcoming for a child who had just lost everything. "This is where you will stay," Ryla said flatly. "Do not leave without my permission. Do not speak to any dragon unless they speak to you first. Do not cause trouble." Danny looked around the room, then back at Ryla. "What's wrong with your breathing?" Ryla blinked. "What? Your breathing. It sounds rough, like something is stuck in your chest." Danny set his stuffed rabbit on the bed. "My mom was a doctor. She used to talk about lungs a lot. She said breathing problems are serious." No one had ever asked Ryla about her illness. Not with genuine concern, anyway. Some dragons mocked her for it. Others simply avoided the subject. But this small human child was looking at her with real worry in his eyes. "It does not matter," Ryla said stiffly. "I have been this way my whole life. There is no cure." Danny tilted his head. "Have you tried human medicine?" "Human medicine?" Ryla almost laughed. "Humans cannot even cure their own diseases. Why would your medicine help a dragon?" "We cure lots of diseases," Danny said simply. "My mom cured people all the time." Ryla did not know how to respond to that. She turned and walked toward the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you will be presented to the court for formal observation." That night, Ryla could not sleep. She kept thinking about the human child and his strange questions. Why did he care about her health? What did he gain for showing concern? In dragon culture, everything was a transaction. Power was exchanged for loyalty. Strength was traded for respect. No one gave anything for free, but Danny had offered friendship without asking for anything in return. It made no sense. Around midnight, Ryla felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Her lungs seized up, making each breath feel like swallowing broken glass. She stumbled out of her chamber, trying to find somewhere private to suffer through the episode. She did not want anyone to see her like this. The shame would be unbearable. She collapsed in a corridor near the servant quarters, gasping for air, her claws scraping against the stone floor, and then she heard small footsteps approaching. Danny appeared around the corner, still wearing his sleeping clothes, his stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. He saw Ryla on the ground and immediately ran to her side. "Don't," Ryla tried to speak, but her voice came out as a wheeze. "Don't call for help. Please." "The shame, I won't," Danny said quietly. He sat down on the floor beside her, crossing his legs. "I'll just stay here with you." "Why?" Ryla managed to ask between painful breaths. Danny shrugged. "Because being alone when you're hurting is the worst feeling in the world." "I know. I was alone in that pod for 2 days before they found me." Ryla stared at him. This tiny creature, this supposedly dangerous deathworlder, was sitting on a hot stone floor in the middle of the night just so she would not have to suffer alone. For the next hour, Danny stayed beside her. He talked quietly about his parents, about his home on the colony ship, about the games he used to play with the other children. He did not expect Ryla to respond. He just talked, filling the silence with soft words until her breathing slowly returned to normal. When the episode finally passed, Ryla sat up weakly. Her whole body ached. But somewhere beneath the pain, she felt something she had not experienced in decades: gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Danny smiled at her. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but genuine. That's what friends do. Ryla looked at the human child for a long moment. He had shown her more kindness in one night than she had received from her own species in 100 years. She did not understand it. She was not sure she ever would. But for the first time in her life, Ryla thought that maybe, just maybe, she was not completely alone. "Come," she said, rising to her feet. "I will walk you back to your room. The floor is too hot for humans to sit on for so long." Danny stood up, brushing dust from his clothes. "Will you be okay?" Ryla paused. No one had ever asked her that question before. "I do not know," she answered honestly. "But tonight, I am better than I was. Because of you." They walked back through the corridors together, the ancient dragon and the human child, and for the first time since her hatching, Ryla did not feel like a burden. She felt like she mattered. News traveled fast in the Dragon Palace that by morning, every servant, guard, and noble knew what had happened in the corridor. The human child had found Ryla during one of her episodes. Instead of calling for help or running away, he had simply sat with her in the dark, talking quietly until she recovered. Some dragons found it amusing. A deathworlder playing nursemaid to the weakest dragon at court. What a joke. Others found it disturbing. Humans were supposed to be violent and dangerous. They were not supposed to show compassion to other species. This behavior did not match anything in the historical records. High Warden Draken found it suspicious. He cornered Danny in the training yard later that day. The human child had been watching young dragons practice their fire breathing, keeping a safe distance from the flames. When Draken's massive shadow fell over him, Danny looked up without flinching. "Human," Draken growled, lowering his scarred head until his eyes were level with Danny's. "I want to know the truth. What are you planning?" Danny blinked. "Planning? Do not play innocent with me. I have interrogated war criminals, diplomats, and spies. I know manipulation when I see it." Draken's hot breath washed over Danny like a wave of heat. "You are building a connection with Ryla, creating debt, making her trust you. Why? What do you want from her?" Danny thought about the question for a moment. Then he said, "She was hurting. I didn't want her to be alone." "That is not an answer." "Yes, it is." Danny met the dragon's burning gaze without looking away. "Where I come from, when someone is hurting, you help them. That's just what you do." Draken studied the human child's face. He had spent centuries learning to read deception in the expressions of 100 different species. He could detect lies hidden beneath layers of truth, schemes buried under false kindness. But in Danny's eyes, he saw nothing but honesty. It unsettled him more than any threat ever could. "You are either the most skilled deceiver I have ever encountered," Draken said slowly, "or you are exactly what you appear to be. I cannot decide which possibility is more dangerous." He turned and walked away, leaving Danny alone in the training yard. Over the following days, Danny spent all his time with Ryla. He asked her endless questions about dragon culture, their history, their beliefs. She answered as best she could, surprised by how curious he was about everything. "Why do dragons not help the weak?" Danny asked one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. Even the plants here were adapted to extreme heat. Red flowers that thrived in volcanic soil, trees with bark as hard as stone. Because weakness is a burden, Ryla explained. The strong must not be slowed down by those who cannot keep up. It is the way things have always been. That's sad. Ryla looked at him. It is practical. It's still sad. Danny kicked at a pebble on the path. On my ship, we took care of everyone. Old people, sick people, babies. Everyone mattered. My mom used to say that helping someone was the bravest thing you could do. Bravery is for battle, Ryla said automatically. No, Danny shook his head. Battle is easy. You just have to be strong and angry. But helping someone when you could just walk away? That takes real courage. Ryla fell silent. She had never thought about bravery that way before. In dragon culture, courage was measured in victories, in enemies defeated, in territories conquered. The idea that kindness could be a form of bravery was completely foreign to her. But the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. That night, Danny could not sleep. He lay on his stone bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Ryla's illness. The dragon healers had given up on her long ago. They said her condition was incurable. But Danny knew that human medicine had cured many things that other species thought were impossible. His mother had told him stories about diseases that once killed millions of people but were now completely preventable. What if her illness was one of them? He sat up suddenly, an idea forming in his mind. The medical bay on the horizon's dream. It had been filled with equipment and medicine. The ship was destroyed, yes, but not everything would have been lost. Emergency medical supplies were designed to survive catastrophic damage. If he could get back to the wreckage, he might find something that could help Ryla. The next morning, Danny found Ryla in her chamber. I need you to take me somewhere, he said. Ryla looked at him warily. Where? Back to my ship. The one that was destroyed. Why would you want to return there? Danny took a deep breath. Because I think there might be medicine that could help you. Human medicine. The kind my mom used. Ryla's eyes widened. Danny, that is impossible. The wreckage is days away. We would have to steal a ship. If we were caught, we would both be executed. I know. Then why would you risk that? Danny looked up at her with steady eyes. Because you're my friend. And I made a promise to myself when my parents died. I said I would never let someone suffer if I could do something to help. I meant it. Ryla stared at him for a long time. Every instinct told her to refuse. The risk was too great. The punishment for leaving the palace without permission was death. But when she looked into Danny's eyes, she saw something she had never seen directed at her before. She saw someone who believed she was worth saving. If we do this, Ryla said slowly, we must not be discovered. We leave tonight under cover of darkness. We return before the dawn patrol. Danny nodded. Thank you, Ryla. Do not thank me yet, little human. Ryla shook her head. Thank me if we survive. That night, under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, a sickly dragon and a human orphan slipped out of the palace and disappeared into the darkness. Neither of them knew if they would ever return. The debris field stretched across the void like a wound in space. Ryla had borrowed a small transport ship from the palace docks, using her guardian credentials to avoid questions. The journey had taken 8 hours, and Danny had spent most of it staring out the window in silence. Now, as the wreckage of the Horizon's dream came into view, she understood why. Pieces of the colony ship drifted in a slow spiral around a central mass of twisted metal. Frozen bodies floated among the debris, preserved perfectly in the cold vacuum. Some of them were children. Some of them were wearing pajamas, caught in the disaster while they slept. Danny, Ryla said gently, you do not have to do this. We can turn back. No. Danny's voice was quiet but firm. These were my people, my neighbors, my friends. The least I can do is find something useful in what's left. Ryla guided the transport ship through the debris field with careful precision. Danny directed her toward a section of the hull that was still partially intact, the medical wing. When they found an opening large enough for the ship to enter, Ryla docked carefully against the twisted metal. Danny put on a small environment suit that Ryla had brought for him. It was designed for young dragons, far too large for a human child, but it would keep him alive in the vacuum. He stepped through the airlock and into the ghost of his former home. The medical bay was dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered weakly, running on reserve power that had somehow survived the disaster. Danny moved through the corridors he had once known so well. Now transformed into a frozen tomb, he found the main treatment room. The beds were empty. The equipment was scattered. But along one wall, still sealed in their protective cases, were rows of medical containers. Emergency supplies designed to survive exactly this kind of catastrophe. Danny began searching through them, reading labels with his helmet light. Most of it meant nothing to him. He was not a doctor. He did not know what half of these medicines did. But then he found something familiar, the case labeled with his mother's handwriting. Respiratory treatment kit, full spectrum. He had watched her pack this case 100 times. She had always kept it ready, just in case someone on the ship developed breathing problems. She used to say that lungs were tricky and it was better to be prepared. Danny picked up the case and held it against his chest. For a moment, he allowed himself to miss her, to remember her smile, her gentle hands, the way she always knew exactly what to say when he was scared. Then he wiped his eyes and kept searching till he found the ship's medical database next, a small device that contained centuries of human medical knowledge. If dragon doctors could read it, they might learn something useful. He tucked it into his suit along with the medicine case. On his way back to the transport ship, Danny passed the family quarters. He stopped at a door he recognized. His door. His room. He should not go in. There was no time. Every minute they spent here increased the chance of being discovered. But he pushed the door open anyway. His room was exactly as he remembered it. His bed, still made the way his mother had taught him. His drawings on the wall, pictures of stars and planets and imaginary aliens. His other stuffed animals, floating gently in the zero gravity. Danny collected them all. A bear, a dog, a strange purple creature he had made up himself. He put them in a bag and held them close. These were the last pieces of his old life. The last proof that he had once had a family, a home, a place where he belonged. When he returned to the transport ship, Ryla saw the bag of toys and the tears frozen on his face inside the helmet. She did not say anything. She just helped him out of the suit and wrapped one wing around him as the ship pulled away from the wreckage. "Tell me about them," she said quietly as they flew back toward Paranthus. "Your family. What were they like?" Danny talked for the entire journey. He told her about his father, who built things with his hands and told terrible jokes. About his mother, who healed people and sang songs while she worked. About his friends on the ship, the games they played, the dreams they shared. Ryla listened to every word. When they finally approached Paranthus, Danny had stopped crying. He looked up at Ryla with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you for taking me there. Thank you for trusting me enough to ask." But as they landed at the palace docks, both of them realized something was wrong. The dock was not empty. Standing in the dim light, his massive form blocking their path, was High Warden Draken. He had been waiting for them. "So," Draken said, his voice echoing through the dock. The Death Worlder and the Sick One thought they could sneak away without anyone noticing. Danny stepped forward, putting himself between Draken and Ryla. "She only came because I asked her to. If you're going to punish someone, punish me." Draken stared down at the tiny human standing defiantly before him. Then he reached out with one massive claw and gripped Danny's shoulder, not gently. "Both of you will come with me. The Sovereign will decide your fate." As they were marched through the palace corridors, Ryla felt terror rising in her chest. The punishment for unauthorized departure was death. They had both known the risk. But when she looked at Danny, walking calmly beside her with his bag of toys and his case of medicine, she saw no fear in his eyes, only determination. Whatever happened next, he had done what he set out to do. He had tried to help his friend, and that, Ryla realized, was the most human thing of all. The great hall fell silent when Danny and Ryla were brought before the Sovereign. Every dragon in the palace had gathered to witness the judgment. They lined the walls and filled the elevated perches, their glowing eyes fixed on the small human and the sickly dragoness standing in the center of the chamber. The air was thick with heat and anticipation. Sovereign Ashgara sat upon her obsidian throne, her ancient eyes unreadable. She had ruled the Draconis Dominion for 10,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall, She had made decisions that shaped the fate of entire star systems. Now she would decide whether a human child and a weak dragon would live or die. High Warden Draken stepped forward. Great Sovereign, these two left the palace without authorization. They stole a transport ship and traveled to the wreckage of the human colony vessel. This is a direct violation of your command that the human remain at court. The crowd murmured. Leaving without permission was a serious offense. For a Deathworlder to do so was practically an act of war. What do you have to say for yourselves? Ashkara asked, her voice rumbling like distant thunder. Danny stepped forward before Ryla could speak. He was still holding the case of medicine and the medical database. His bag of stuffed animals hung from his shoulder. He looked impossibly small, standing before the massive Dragon Empress. I asked Ryla to take me there, he said clearly. She didn't want to go. I convinced her. If anyone should be punished, it should be me. Another murmur rippled through the court. A human taking responsibility for a dragon. Protecting her from punishment. It was unheard of. And why? Ashkara asked slowly. Did you feel the need to return to that wreckage? Danny lifted the case of medicine. Because I think this might help Ryla's illness. It's human medicine for breathing problems. My mom was a doctor. She used this to cure people all the time. The court erupted into noise. Dragons spoke over each other, some mocking the idea, others expressing shock. Draken stepped forward again. This is manipulation, he declared. The human created a situation where the sickly one would feel indebted to him. He is building loyalty, creating a follower. This is exactly the kind of deception that makes humans dangerous. Ashkara raised one claw, and the hall fell silent again. She rose from her throne and descended the steps, her massive body creating tremors with each movement. The dragons in the crowd pulled back as she passed, giving her space. She stopped directly in front of Danny, lowering her head until her eye was level with his entire body. Human, she said, I'm going to ask you a question. I have lived for 10,000 years. I have heard every lie ever spoken in every language in the galaxy. If you deceive me, I will know. Danny swallowed hard but did not look away. Why did you risk your life to help a dragon you barely know? What do you gain from this? Danny thought about the question. He could feel the weight of every dragon's stare pressing down on him. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. Because that's what you do for family. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Family. Dragons did not choose their families. They were born into bloodlines and competed for position within them. The idea of selecting someone as family, especially someone from another species, was completely alien. Family, Ashkara repeated. You consider Ryla to be your family? She's my friend, Danny said. And where I come from, friends are the family you choose. You take care of them. You protect them. You don't let them suffer alone when you can do something to help. The sovereign was silent for a long moment. Her ancient eyes studied the human child with an intensity that seemed to look right through him, seeing everything he was and everything he might become. Then she turned to Ryla. And you, Ashkara said, do you believe this human acted out of manipulation or genuine care? Ryla had been trembling since they entered the hall, but now she straightened her spine and met the sovereign's gaze directly. Great Sovereign, I have lived for 100 years at this court. In all that time, no one has ever shown me kindness. I have been mocked, ignored, and forgotten because of my weakness. My own blood relatives have treated me with less care than they show their hunting animals. She took a breath, and for once it did not hurt. This human child, from a species we call dangerous, has shown me more compassion in one lunar cycle than I have received in my entire life. He sat with me when I could not breathe. He risked his life to find medicine that might help me. He offered friendship without asking for anything in return. Ryla's voice grew stronger. If this is manipulation, then it is a kind of manipulation I would gladly accept. But I do not believe it is. I believe this human simply cares about others. And I believe that caring about others, even when it costs you something, is a kind of strength that we dragons have forgotten. The court was utterly silent. Draken looked uncomfortable. He had expected a quick execution, not a philosophical debate about the nature of kindness. Ashkara turned back to Danny. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close to it. Human, she said, I have made a decision. You will not be executed for leaving the palace. Neither will Ryla. Danny let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Instead, the sovereign continued. I am going to offer you a choice. You may return to human space immediately. You will be given a ship and supplies, and you will never set foot in the Draconis Dominion again. Or, she paused, letting the word hang in the air. Or you may remain here at the Dragon Court, permanently, as a citizen of the Dominion. The court exploded into chaos. Dragons shouted protests, questions, objections. Draken looked like he might actually breathe fire, but Danny did not hear any of it. He looked at Ryla. She looked back at him, and he knew exactly what his choice would be. Danny looked up at the sovereign and gave his answer. I want to stay. The court, which had been buzzing with noise, fell quiet again. Even Draken stopped his protest to stare at the human child. But Danny continued, I have one condition. Ashkara tilted her head slightly. In 10,000 years, no one had ever placed conditions on her offers. Speak. Danny pointed at Ryla. I want her to be my sister. The silence that followed was absolute. No dragon moved. No dragon breathed. It was as if time itself had stopped. Your sister, Ashkara repeated slowly. Yes. Danny nodded firmly. Not just my guardian. Not just my friend. My actual sister. Family. If I'm going to stay here, I want to stay as part of a real family. And I choose her. Ryla stared at him with wide eyes. Danny, you cannot. Yes, I can. He turned to face her. You said dragons don't choose their families. Well, humans do. And I choose you, Ryla. You're the kindest person I've met in this whole place. You risked everything to help me when you didn't have to. That's what family does. Ryla's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in her 100 years, she had no idea what to say. Draken stepped forward, his voice sharp. Great Sovereign, this is absurd. A human requesting formal kinship with a dragon? It has never been done. It makes a mockery of our bloodlines. Does it? Ashkara asked calmly. The other species will see this as weakness. They will think we have grown soft, that a single human child has changed us. And what do you think, High Warden? The Sovereign's eyes fixed on Draken with an intensity that made him freeze. Do you believe showing mercy is weakness? Do you believe choosing compassion over violence makes one less powerful? Draken hesitated. He had served Ashkara for 3,000 years. He knew when she was asking a real question and when she was teaching a lesson. I do not know, Great Sovereign. Ashkara nodded slowly. Then perhaps it is time you learned. She turned to address the entire court. Her voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber, reaching every dragon who had gathered to witness this moment. For 10,000 years, we have measured strength by fire and fury, by battles won and enemies defeated. We have valued power above all else, and we have forgotten something important. She looked down at Danny, at this small human child standing bravely in a room full of predators, offering kindness to a species that had every reason to destroy him. True strength is not found only in conquest. True strength is choosing mercy when violence would be easier, choosing connection when isolation would be safer. This human child has shown more courage in his compassion than many of you have shown in your entire lives. The crowd stirred uncomfortably. Some dragons looked ashamed. Others looked thoughtful. A few, including Draken, simply looked confused. I accept the human's condition, Ashkara declared. From this day forward, Danny Wells and Ryla are hereby recognized as siblings under the Imperial bloodline. They are family, not by birth but by choice. And they shall be treated with the full respect and protection that status demands. The court erupted into noise again, but this time it was different. There was surprise, yes, and confusion. But there was also something else. Something that sounded almost like wonder. Draken approached Danny slowly. The massive dragon knelt down until they were almost at eye level. I have spent my entire life believing that humans were dangerous, Draken said quietly. That your species was a threat that needed to be contained. I believed kindness was a weakness to be exploited. Danny looked at him without fear. And now, Draken was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his great head. Now I think I may have been wrong. About humans. About strength. About many things. Danny smiled and extended his small hand. That's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is learning from them. Draken stared at the offered hand. In dragon culture, such gestures were reserved for equals. For a human child to offer it to a high warden was unprecedented. But after a moment, Draken reached out with one massive claw and carefully touched Danny's palm. Perhaps, the dragon said slowly, I could learn a great deal from you, little human. 10 years later, Ambassador Fennec returned to the Dragon Court. The changes were remarkable. Humans walked freely through the palace corridors, working alongside dragons on diplomatic missions and scientific research. The medical knowledge Danny had recovered had not only cured Ryla's illness, but had helped dozens of other dragons with similar conditions. Ryla herself had become one of the Dominion's most respected diplomats. Her scales gleamed with health, and her fire burned as bright as any dragon's. She led missions to human worlds, building bridges between species that had once been strangers, and always at her side was her brother. Danny had grown into a young man, tall and confident. He moved through the dragon court as naturally as any born citizen. Dragons respected him not because he was powerful, but because he was kind. Fennec found them in the palace gardens, laughing together about some private joke. When he approached, both of them rose to greet him. Ambassador, Danny said warmly, it's good to see you again. Fennec looked around at the transformed court. When I first brought you here, I hoped for a diplomatic gesture. I never imagined this. Danny shrugged. I just treated people the way I wanted to be treated. That's what humans do. The human way, Ryla added with a smile. It turns out to be more powerful than fire. That evening, as the twin sons of Paranthus set over the volcanic mountains, Ryla took flight. Her wings caught the warm updrafts, carrying her higher and higher into the golden sky. And riding on her back, laughing with pure joy, was Danny. Below them, dragons and humans walked together through the streets of the capital. Children of both species played in the gardens, their games a mix of human and dragon traditions. The Dominion was changing, slowly but surely, one act of kindness at a time. That IT had started with an orphan and an outcast, two beings that no one had valued, who had found worth in each other. From that small beginning, something beautiful had grown. Danny wrapped his arms around his sister's neck and watched the horizon stretch out before them. Somewhere out, there were other species, other worlds, other cultures waiting to be understood. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that compassion would always be stronger than fear. Ready to go home? Ryla called back over the wind. Danny smiled. I already am. They flew together toward the setting suns, the dragon and her human brother, proof that family was not about blood or species, that IT was about choice, and they had chosen each other.